Hey guys, True Grit Scott, Bulletproof Saws and Bluesaws.com. Working on a couple saws today. I figured I'd talk about them for a second because there's a couple interesting things. I'll get this Blue 440 out of the way first. One of the things, I think I've mentioned it before, but I'm not 100% certain, is that I believe Farmertec is, what would you say, not doing some of the blue saws anymore. I think they're going to continue the Blue 44 and the Blue 660, but I don't know if they're going to continue any of the other blue saws. Now they're all collector's items. So I'm not sure if they're going to hold to that or not, but that's just what Farmertec's been telling us. And we've noticed that the availability is not there for the saws, and I imagine some of the parts are going to get even skinnier, which doesn't kill me, guys, because it's miserable. If you take a saw like a 372 especially, you have full orange, you have orange and gray, then you had blue. Now you have to have pieces in all three colors for those saws, which is kind of a royal pain in the ass. Anyhow, so that was not it on this saw, actually. There was another thing on this saw that I wanted to talk about. We run the saws, obviously, before we ship them out. We're the only real dealer who does that. The only real dealer, but that's a different story. But you know, we run every saw just because when you put fuel in the tank, maybe there's a crack somewhere, maybe something's leaking, and when you run them before they go, we don't have any problems. That's why, you know, our customers don't have returns. They're not, you know, waiting for parts, not having problems. On this one, I noticed it wasn't oiling quite right, and when I went in, I had actually done a pre-flight on this, and I pulled the clutch off, and I noticed that it looked to me like I have it in my pocket actually, the worm gear. And hopefully you guys could see from this distance, the way the worm gear works is your clutch drum sits over the clutch and the worm gear, and there's a little notch in the clutch drum that catches the worm gear and spins it to pump oil. Well, the one in this saw was a little tiny bit short, so it would catch but not perfectly, and I think as it was running it might have popped out of that notch, popped back in that notch. If that clutch drum was just a tiny bit out of round or whatever, maybe it would, you know, pop in and out. It wasn't oiling great, so I swapped out the worm gear before this goes out, which is, you know, a nice catch. So if somebody has inconsistent oiling, check that worm gear and see if that wire's fitting into the notch, for lack of a better, the arm is fitting into the notch of the clutch drum. Spin it all the way around, make sure it's staying in there. What I'll do sometimes is, you know, I'll spin it 90, pull it off, make sure that the worm gear actually changed. Spin it 90, make sure that the worm gear actually changed positions. So that was one thing. Now on this 466, I'm sending it, I know this isn't a great position on this log, but it's what I had available. This 466, you know, I fuel it up, start it, it starts, doesn't sound quite right. Oh boy, this wasn't one that got a pre-flight, this was just a run before I ship it out, so I didn't go as in-depth on this one. Well, I already know what it is. What Farmertec's been doing is there's different carbs that come on both the 44 and the 46. It's the same version of a carb, or it's the same carb, but there's at least 3 different versions that I know of. The gold standard is the HLIC carb. These carbs run, in my opinion, as good as the Walbro HD14. And to be honest with you, I like the HD14 better than the HD17 or 18, which is also a 440 carb. Those were the EPA carbs, and even if the jetting's the same, just the limiters on the other one, which I know you could pull out the limiters, I like the old 14s better. They just seemed like a better carb to me. So to me, these HLIC carbs are, if I have a Walbro sitting on the shelf for a build that I'm doing for myself, and I have an HLIC, I'll reach up and I'll grab either one, use them interchangeably because I like these that well. The way you could tell, besides they're both labeled, so this is the worst of the bunch that I know of, is the ANCA DBA carb and CADBA. You could tell just from looking in the side of it real quick because it has the cover for the screws. So your high and low jet are covered on that, whereas the HLIC, it's open. There's another carb that they put in them, and it's a no-name carb with open screws, and I don't have as good luck with that, but it's generally not as bad as this one. So what Farmertec's doing is either they're running out of HLICs, they're fighting with HLIC, they're trying to save them, I don't know what they're doing, but we've been seeing these ANCA DBA carbs coming on 46s more often, but also occasionally on the 440s. They used to be the worst carb I've ever tried. Couldn't even get them to run. Seems like they slightly improved them because now you get the saw to run, but if you can't get full RPMs out of it, or if you have erratic idle, I don't trust them. I won't use them. I don't like them. And for somebody who was getting a pre-flight, I'd probably swap it out as part of the service. But for just, you're buying a saw, I want to tell people that we have these carbs available. And kind of like what we do on the 372s, everybody knows you need to swap to a Walbro on those. The G466s, you need to find another carb solution. I'm hoping the 466 doesn't come in to be a permanent crappy carb saw, because that'd be a damn shame. But there's no telling what's going to happen. We have the HLICs available. Once we saw this happening, we stocked up on hundreds of these just to have them in case they went away, because sometimes things disappear and you can't get them, and it took us quite a while to get these carbs. They weren't easy to get, and dealing with HLIC is very difficult. So we finally got them. I have them. I can put them on saws. So if you guys are having problems, especially with the 460 or a 440, won't hold a tune, running erratically, does something one day, does something different the next day, pop that carb out. If you have the ANCA DBA carb, you're gonna have problems. I won't use them. Don't like them. Don't know how to say it nicer than that. I feel like I'm being mean, but I throw them in the trash, to be honest with you. The HLICs have been rock solid for years now. For 6 years, I have no problems with those. So I'm gonna stick with those because they tune, they work really well. What else was I going to tell you guys? I guess that was it. So after switching the carb on this guy, idle's perfect, throttles, response is exceptional. Like, it just runs the way it should. I've seen people in the forums say they've gotten the 460. They don't like the 466. It's just not great. Not as good as the OEM saw. Chances are you have a crappy carb. I'll try to see if I can come over here and just show you real quick. So I know you probably can't see from 10 miles away the way I'm holding that stuff. All right, let's see. Here's your, I hope this is working, the Anaconda carb, we'll call it. And you can see it's got the cover, and then just our regular HLIC. Well, I'll turn it around the same way, and you can see that they're open. I mean, the construction, it doesn't look like the ANCDBA carb should be a bad carb, but it is. And I'm not saying that there's a guy out there who doesn't have one that runs halfway decent. Like I said, I think they've improved these because they wouldn't run at all a few years ago. Like, they were the worst carb I've ever seen, which, to be honest with you, given the choice, I'd rather have a carb that's junk out of the box, doesn't run, because then you know to throw it in the bin. But when you get a carb that intermittently runs, and it kind of idles, it kind of, maybe I just got to keep tuning. Oh, maybe it's a tank vent, maybe it's a fuel line, maybe I have this, that, and the... A half-working carb will cause you to chase your tail trying to diagnose something. And it'll make you crazy, especially if some of the things that it's doing don't seem real fuel related. I chased the G466s for a while on problems that you would think were not a carb. It was a carb. And that just happens. And I'm not a fella who goes right to, oh, just it's a carb. It's always a carb. A lot of, what would you say? Beginning saw mechanics go right to the carb every time. Oh, it's always the carb. It's not always the carb, and if you have a decent carb, it's rarely the carb. Tuning could be off, but usually it's not bad carb problems, except with a lot of the aftermarket carbs, and I don't love them. The HLIC on the 395 has been exceptional. On the 880s, the G888s, the Farmertec ones, been exceptional. The 660s, exceptional. 361 or the G366, no bueno. The 372 XP, no bueno. And those are HLIC carbs, so I don't know how they could get it right consistently on so many models that they're the best of the aftermarket carbs, period. And then on those two, just screw the pooch. Anyhow, guys, probably a longer video than I meant to. Just talking about some of these saws. 466s run really well. A lot of guys prefer, I even have always preferred the 440, but when you have a 460 running right, they're a beast of a saw, and they are great. The 440s are super nice too, and it depends. Over the years, they've changed the cylinders on these. They went from a D cylinder on a 460 to a non-D cylinder and back and forth, and I know that some of these with the good D cylinders are great running saws. I didn't pop the top off of this one because that's not what the job was, so I don't know what cylinder's in it, but it didn't have it in the wood, just running the saw, but it felt wonderful, every bit as fast as the 440. Faster, I don't know, I'd have to put bars on them, chains, and play around with it, but they're much better saws than people give them credit for with the right components. Anyhow, guys, True Grit Scott, Bulletproof Saws at Bluesaws.com. Thanks for watching and stay safe.